G'day mate, 40 here. So I'm right by the public loo where George Michael got arrested for soliciting an undercover officer back in, what was it, 1990 or so. And the English have a term for this, it's called Cottaging, where you're hooking up with random gay dudes at a public lavatory. I remember one of the most shocking experiences of my young sheltered life in Cottaging, Australia. I think we went to Lake Macquarie and used the public loo there. And there are all these messages about, come here at 10 p.m. and on Tuesday and I'll suck your cock. It's like, whoa. We didn't have that kind of solicitation at Avondale College, Seventh Adventist College, where I grew up in New South Wales. So I was prompting these heartfelt reflections on cottaging, particularly cottaging on cliffs, is that I've been reading a book called Bondi Badlands about the murder of approximately 80 gay men, Bondi Beach, Australia's eastern suburbs, New Sydney's eastern suburbs in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and the police didn't really pay much attention. Gay sex between men only became legal in New South Wales in 1984. Women were only allowed to drink in bars in New South Wales in the 1960s. So anyway, apparently because of the repressive, heterosexist, patriarchal, late capitalist, neoliberal system under which oppressed New South Wales homosexuals are living, they were practically forced to go out to the cliffs by Bondi Beach, Tamarama Beach, if they wanted to socialize and have some random hookups. And at this time, late 80s, early 90s, AIDS was widely regarded as a death sentence. And homosexual men were the primary carriers of AIDS or victims of AIDS at the time. There were two main ways of getting AIDS then, unprotected anal sex and carrying intravenous drug needles. And apparently not everyone was thrilled with all the gay men who would go onto the cliffs over Bondi Beach and Tamarama Beach like late at night. I mean, they'd typically go there 2 a.m. They'd drive by for a quickie. And not everyone approved. And so there were, I guess, random packs of, I would expect, young men who would grab these blokes in the act and throw them over the cliff. So my first thought is, number one, anyone who participates in murder, I'd like to see them get the death penalty. Number two, that the media portrayals of these victims as, what upstanding blokes they were, what great lives they were leading. Well, how upstanding and great can your life be if you're handing off, you're hanging out at cliffs at 2 a.m. hoping to hook up with a random stranger for a bit of sex in a public park, in a public area, where there are neighbors and people with kids and decent law-abiding people, and you're having it off in a public part of a major city. So if you don't respect yourself, it's really hard for other people to respect you. And I think that accounts for the lack of police interest in these cases. Like, this was a community of people who didn't respect themselves. If they're heading out to cliffs at 2 a.m., even though they're known to be dangerous, even though there are all sorts of attacks known to take place against gay men. But that excitement just made the erotic charge even more intense, apparently. So if you give in to this sort of thing, right, if you're heading over to the cliffs at 2:30 a.m., you can't expect people to treat you with respect if you don't treat yourself with respect. And if your community doesn't act in a respectable fashion, you can't expect outsiders to your group to treat your community in a respectful fashion. Like if there are a whole bunch of awful crimes in LA and they're all committed by Orthodox Jews, right, that would have a negative effect on how outsiders to our community viewed us. And the other thing I was thinking about, because you don't hear about various public parks where heteros get together to have random hookups. It's not really a hetero thing. Women aren't into that normally. You do a decoding a deep left joke? Yeah, I will. I decided to make some notes on decoding a deep left joke. One thing that's interesting about him is that he likes to delete his videos. He doesn't want to stand behind them. He's got all sorts of elaborate explanations for why he deletes his videos, but there's someone who doesn't want to stand behind what he says. The elaborate explanation is, I can always do better. Well, that's not true. There are plenty of great videos in 2018 that I did in 2018 that I could not do in 2023 for various reasons. So, Bootcraft, I'd just like to tell you, I don't want you to make the mistakes I did. I want you to walk away from trouble when you can. Right? It doesn't mean that you're not a man if you avoid a fight. So, I had this girl, Becky, and in her arms I found the peace I'd never known. But then the Gatlin boys came riding. They all took turns with my Becky. So I tracked down the Gatlin boys to this bar. When I turned around, they said, there's old Yeller, running away. But you could have heard a pin drop when I locked the door. When I was done, not a Gatlin boy was left standing. So that's just what I wanted to tell you, Luke Ruff. You don't have to fight to be a man. Anyway. So if there were like public toilets or public parks or cliffs or cottages, where heterosexuals could go, and they knew that they'd have like a 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 2 chances of getting off with some rando, like they'd probably show up, even if they also knew they probably have a 1 in 10 chance of getting thrown off a cliff. But to the best of my knowledge, there aren't any public lavatories or public parks where heteros stand like a 1 in 3 chance of getting off with some random Sheila. So men with a heterosexual inclination, they have a pretty good check on their wild side, because women much more disciplined in these matters, and women therefore discipline men and make men better. So men and women can learn from each other, right? We need each other. Yeah, this book's called Bondi Badlands by Greg Callahan. It's been turned into a podcast by the Sydney Morning Herald and the Melbourne Age. You can find it wherever you'll find a podcast are found, Bondi Badlands. So a spate of about 80 murders of gay men. So just think of the poor judgment, the self-destruction, the lack of self-respect that drives these gay men to go to the cliffs, knowing that dozens have been murdered before them and dozens more have been bashed, hundreds have been bashed and survived, but they're going to head out to the cliffs anyway in hopes of hooking up with some rando. So you might say 40 true aristocrats of the spirit. Like I've learned this from Bronze Age pervert. Men who are aristocrats of the spirit, they love to get together and have sex with each other on beaches and cliffs and anywhere they can. They want to imitate the ways of ancient Greece, where pederasty was considered the highest form of love, where man-boy love was the ideal expression of love. And so that's the way for aristocrats of the spirit. But not everyone is as equally open and enthusiastic about aristocrats of the spirit, having it off in public loos and public parks. Sometimes people react to our vices in ways that we think are over the top, and are over the top, and are often illegal. But we play a pretty big role in putting ourselves in trouble. I mean, how messed up do you have to be to keep heading to a park at 2 a.m., knowing that a lot of people will have been bashed and murdered there, just so that you can try to get off with some rando. But maybe this aristocracy of the spirit, this ancient Greek way of life, this idolization of Caligula, the Bronze Age pervert way of life, maybe it's not everything it's cracked up to be.